The bell above the door rang at 6:42 in the evening. It wasn't a firm ring, the kind that announces someone in a hurry. It was short, almost restrained, as if the person on the other side had pushed the door too carefully, trying not to disturb anyone. Emily was behind the counter, finishing lining up the silverware inside a thick glass cup. She always did that in the late afternoon, even when there were already enough utensils. She looked up. The neon sign outside flickered, its light reflecting against the windows. Open, in red and blue, pulsed faintly, the way it always did when the transformer was getting tired. The sky was beginning to darken, that deep blue shade that only exists between the end of the day and the beginning of night. A man stepped inside and stopped just past the door. He didn't look lost. He looked undecided. He stood there for a few seconds, one hand still on the handle, as if he might change his mind and leave at any moment. Emily recognized the type. People who walk into a diner not because they're hungry, but because they need to be somewhere that isn't where they were before. She set the glass down, adjusted the red apron at her waist, and took a steady breath. "Good evening," she said, her voice calm and firm, without overdoing it. The man blinked, as if pulled back from a distant thought. "Good evening." His voice was low, a little rough, not the kind that comes from shouting too much, but from speaking very little all day. "You can sit wherever you like." He looked around. Only a few tables were occupied. An elderly couple by the window shared a slice of apple pie. A lone truck driver scrolled through his phone, a cup of coffee already cold and forgotten in front of him. In the corner, near the jukebox, an empty table still showed the marks of poorly dried glasses. The man walked toward the counter. Sitting at the counter was almost always a sign. People who didn't want to be completely alone, but also didn't want to commit to too much conversation. Emily watched as he pulled out the stool and sat down. His shoulders were slightly hunched, as if carrying more weight than they appeared to. His jacket was simple, but clean. Worn, the kind that doesn't draw attention, but doesn't suggest carelessness either. "Coffee?" she asked. He hesitated. Just a second, but enough for Emily to notice. "Yes, black, please." She poured the coffee without asking anything else. The dark liquid filled the white cup with a soft, familiar sound. Steam rose between them, bringing with it that bitter scent that was as much a part of the Maple Root diner as the bell on the door. "Thank you," he said. Emily nodded and stepped back a little, giving him space. In a diner, space mattered just as much as presence. She took care of another table, wrote down a simple order, brought ketchup to the counter, exchanged a few words with the truck driver. When she returned, the man still hadn't touched his coffee. He held the cup with both hands, as if he needed it to stay anchored there. His eyes were fixed on the surface of the liquid, but clearly not seeing it. Emily leaned against the counter, keeping a respectful distance. "First time here?" she asked. He looked up. "No." He thought for a moment. "I've driven by a few times, never came in. And today you did." He shrugged. "Today it felt necessary." Emily gave a small smile without irony. "This place tends to have that effect on people." He let out a half smile, almost involuntary. The old radio mounted on the wall behind the counter played a slow country song. It talked about long roads, small towns, and things left behind. The singer's voice sounded tired, but honest. "Long day?" Emily asked. The man let the air out slowly before answering. "Long life." She nodded, as if that made perfect sense. "Want to look at the menu? Maybe later." Another silence. Heavier now, but not uncomfortable. The kind of silence that settles in when someone is trying to organize too many thoughts at once. Emily had seen it before, many times. People who walk into the Maple Root diner carrying something that doesn't fit inside them anymore. "You've worked here a long time?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Long enough to recognize when someone didn't come in just to eat," she replied without accusation. He took a deep breath, a little surprised. "Is it that obvious?" "To those who pay attention, yes." He looked back at the cup, finally took a sip, made a slight face. "Bitter. Life usually is," Emily said, "but it helps keep us awake." He let out a short laugh, not amused, but genuine. he started, then stopped. I lost someone, he said finally. She didn't respond right away. She didn't die, he added quickly, as if he felt the need to clarify, but it felt like she did. Emily tilted her head slightly. People can leave in many ways, she said. Not all of them come with clear goodbyes. He nodded. I don't think I ever really said goodbye. The bell above the door rang again as someone left. The sound echoed through the nearly empty diner. Emily kept her eyes on him. She still didn't know his name. She didn't know where he came from or where he was going, but she knew one thing. He hadn't walked in by accident, and that conversation was only just beginning. The man fell silent after his last sentence. Emily realized it wasn't an empty silence. It was the kind of pause that happens when someone finally decides to stop running from their own thoughts. She respected it. She picked up a clean cloth and began drying another cup, more slowly than necessary. At the Maple Root Diner, rushing never helped. Do you want to talk about her? Emily asked without pressing. He took a deep breath, as if weighing the cost of what he was about to say. I think if I don't talk now, I never will. Emily nodded. Then talk. He ran his hand along the side of the cup, feeling its warmth. Her name was Sarah. He said the name carefully, almost as if it might break if spoken too loudly. We worked together for almost 5 years. Same building, same floor. Never on the same team, but close enough. Emily rested the cloth on the counter. Did you have lunch together? He smiled faintly. Every day. At first it was just coincidence. Then it became routine. We always said it was just friendship. And was it? Emily asked. He thought, at first, maybe. Later, no. At least, not for me. Emily didn't comment. She knew the rest would come. She talked a lot, he continued, about her family, her plans, her frustrations. I listened. I always listened well. He gave a sad smile. I think that's what made her trust me so much. And you? Emily asked. Did you talk about yourself? Almost nothing. She frowned slightly. Why? He took his time answering. Because I was afraid that if I talked too much, she'd see who I really was. And if she saw, maybe she wouldn't like it. So you chose to be safe instead of being honest. He nodded. I was the reliable friend, the guy who was always there, who helped when she needed it, who listened when she fought with someone she was dating. He closed his eyes for a moment. That hurt more than I like to admit. But you stayed, Emily said. I stayed. Because part of me thought that one day she'd look up and realize I had always been there. Emily crossed her arms. You expected her to guess. Yes. The radio switched songs. Something more upbeat now, clashing with the weight of the conversation. And she never noticed, Emily said, more as a statement than a question. No. He let out a short laugh. Or maybe she noticed and pretended not to. Sometimes I wonder about that. Emily tilted her head. And you never said anything? He shook his head. There was always a reason to postpone it. She was seeing someone, or going through a hard time, or I thought I needed to be more stable, more confident, more something, more prepared, Emily finished. Exactly. He took another sip of coffee. The problem is that while I was waiting to be ready, her life kept moving, normally, with choices, with decisions. Emily leaned her elbows on the counter. And yours stayed on hold. It did, he admitted. I stopped going out with other people, stopped allowing myself to truly like anyone else, because deep down I had already chosen, even without saying it, even without saying it. The bell above the door rang again. A couple walked in, laughing softly. Emily glanced over briefly but didn't move away. When did you realize you had missed your chance? She asked. The man took a deep breath. The day she showed up with a ring. Emily felt the weight of the sentence before he continued. She arrived early that day, sat at my table like always, but she was different, nervous, kept fidgeting with her hands. He smiled at the memory. I thought she was going to complain about her boss, and that wasn't it. No, she said she had news. He swallowed hard. She said she'd been proposed to over the weekend. Emily said nothing. I remember looking at her hand and thinking that ring looked too big, like it didn't belong there. He shrugged. Maybe I just wanted it not to belong. What did you say? Emily asked. He laughed, but his eyes were wet. I said congratulations. I said she deserved to be happy, and I truly meant it. But But when she left the table, I went to the bathroom and stayed there for almost half an hour. Emily closed her eyes for a moment. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just stared at the mirror, trying to understand how someone can lose something they never really had. The silence settled between them again. Did things change after that? Emily asked. She left the job a few months later. Different department, different building. We still talked sometimes. Messages, important dates. He sighed. But it wasn't the same. And you? I stayed stuck for a while, then... He shrugged. Life pushed me forward, I guess. But you're still here, Emily said, gently touching the counter, talking about it years later. He nodded. Because even now it feels like something is still stuck. Not in her, in me. Emily studied his face carefully. What's stuck? He thought. The feeling that I failed myself, that I didn't have the courage when I should have. Emily took a slow breath. That weighs more than losing someone. It does. But let me ask you something, she said, her voice firm but kind. If you had told her and she had said no, do you think you'd be here today? He thought for a long time. Not like this, he answered. I think it would hurt, but it would be a complete pain. Emily nodded. Complete pain. Heals. Unfinished pain stays open. He fell silent, letting that sink in. Outside, the sky was already dark. The glow of the neon sign reflected on the glass. Emily sensed that the conversation was approaching a delicate point. It wasn't the turning point yet, but it was the beginning of the truth, and she knew it. The hardest part was still to come. The man kept staring into the bottom of the empty cup, as if he expected it to say something for him. Emily realized it wasn't about Sarah anymore. It was about what he had done after her. Can I ask you something a little direct? Emily said, resting her hands on the counter. He looked up. You can. Are you still waiting for her? The question landed without brutality, but without anesthesia. He opened his mouth to answer quickly, and couldn't. Closed it again. Breathed. Tried once more. I don't know. Emily held his gaze. Not knowing is also an answer. He gave a half-smile, defeated. I don't expect her to come back. I don't expect her to leave her life, her marriage, any of that. He ran a hand over his face. But I think a part of me still lives like that story was left unfinished. Emily nodded slowly. Like you've been on pause. Exactly. It's ridiculous, I know. It's not ridiculous, Emily replied without hesitation. It's common. Just not healthy. He fell silent, taking the hit. Have you been involved with anyone else since then? She asked. A few attempts. He shrugged. Nothing that went beyond the surface. Why not? Because I compared. He sighed. I always compared. And nobody ever won that comparison. Not even me. Emily leaned in slightly. So you weren't available? No. You were busy saving a seat no one was ever going to take. He closed his eyes for a moment. When you put it like that, it sounds obvious. It always does, Emily said. After someone says it out loud. The bell over the door rang, but no one came in. The wind had pushed the glass. Emily noticed, then brought her focus back to him. Tell me something, she continued. What do you think would have happened if you had told her back then? He took a deep breath. I think 2 possibilities. He raised 2 fingers. Either she would have said no, or she would have said yes. And which one were you prepared for? He let out a humorless laugh. Neither. So you chose the third option, Emily said. Not choosing. He nodded slowly. Staying safe. Staying still. The word hit harder. You know the problem with staying still? Emily went on. Time doesn't stop with you. He looked toward the window at the streetlights outside. I know, I see it every day. How? Everyone around me moved on. Changed. Failed. Started over. He swallowed hard. And I stayed there, being the nice guy, the reliable friend, the guy who doesn't cause trouble. Emily crossed her arms. And who was reliable with you? He opened his mouth and froze. Emily didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. No one, he answered quietly. Not even myself. Emily felt the sentence fall into place, like a piece finally clicking. You didn't lose her, Emily said carefully. You postponed yourself. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it. You know what hurts the most? He asked. What? That if I had been rejected, at least I would have been seen. He laughed nervously. The way it happened, I was invisible, by my own choice. Emily nodded. Self-imposed invisibility hurts more than external rejection. He rubbed his eyes, wiping away something that never quite fell. I'm almost 40, he said, and sometimes it feels like I skipped an entire chapter of my life. Emily placed one steady hand on the counter. You didn't skip it. You got stuck. Is there a difference? There is. She looked straight at him. If you skip something, you can't go back. If you're stuck, you can get unstuck. He breathed deeply, as if testing that idea. And how do you get unstuck? Emily didn't answer right away. She grabbed a clean cup, poured fresh coffee, and set it in front of him. First, she said, you stop romanticizing what never happened. He frowned. What do you mean? You don't know what it would have been like with her, her voice firmed. You know what you imagined it would be like. He stayed quiet. You fell in love with a silent, safe, conflict-free version, Emily continued. But real relationships make noise. They do, he agreed, and you avoided the noise. She took a slow breath. But along with the noise, you avoided life. He lowered his head. That hurts to hear. But it brings relief later, Emily said, because it hurts for the right reason. He stayed silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different. I think I'm still waiting, not for her. He paused, but for the version of myself I could have been. Emily nodded slowly. That version can still exist. He looked up, hopeful but cautious. It can, she said, but not while you live in what if. The clock behind the counter read almost 9 o'clock. Emily knew it. Now the story was ready to turn. The man stayed silent for so long that Emily almost thought he had left on the inside. She had seen that before. People who remain seated but are already somewhere else, digging through something old, heavy, buried, too deep. She didn't interrupt. The radio played softly. Frank laughed about something in the kitchen. The Maple Root diner kept running, as always, indifferent to the small personal revolutions happening inside it. I always thought courage was something big, he finally said. A dramatic gesture, a declaration. One move that changes everything at once. Emily tilted her head. And now I think courage is tolerating discomfort. He gave a half smile. Staying where you really want to run. Emily nodded. Courage is usually pretty boring. He chuckled softly. If someone had told me that before, would I have believed it? Probably not, Emily said. We only understand certain things after they start charging interest. He ran his hand along the counter, distracted. You know what's strangest? He continued. I always saw myself as a kind person, thoughtful, respectful. And you are, Emily said. But I use that as an excuse not to be honest. He took a deep breath. I hid behind good intentions. Emily rested her elbows on the counter. There are a lot of good people out there who hurt others without realizing it. Not out of cruelty, out of fear. He nodded. Fear of losing the little they had. Fear of risking the little for the chance to gain a lot, Emily finished. Have you ever thought about talking to her now? Emily asked carefully. He froze. Not to go back, she added quickly, but to close the chapter. He thought for a long time. I have, many times. He swallowed hard. But it always feels selfish. She moved on, built a life. Why would I stir that up? Emily took a slow breath. It depends on the reason. What would be the right reason? Not to ease your pain by putting weight on her shoulders, Emily said clearly, but to take responsibility for the silence that was yours. He closed his eyes for a moment. Saying I felt instead of you never noticed. Exactly. He thought a little longer. And if I do that, and nothing changes, Emily gave a small smile, something will change. You. He looked at her, attentive. You can't control her reaction, Emily continued, but you can control how you stand in your own story. He took a deep breath, feeling it settle. I always waited for closure to come from the outside. And closure rarely comes from the outside, Emily said. It comes when we decide to stop negotiating with the past. He laughed nervously. You say that like it's simple. It's not simple, Emily replied plainly. It's just possible. The man fell silent again, but this time it wasn't a heavy silence. It was an active one. I don't know if I'll talk to her, he finally said, but I know I need to stop living as if my life depends on something that no longer exists. Emily nodded. That's already a huge beginning. He took out his wallet, pulled out a few bills, but didn't stand up. "There's something else I need to do," he said. "What?" "Stop treating every new person like a replacement for a past that was never real." Emily smiled, satisfied. "That prevents a lot of unnecessary pain." He took a deep breath, as if bracing himself for something. He paused, searching for the words. "I need to allow myself to be seen, even if people don't like what they see." Emily crossed her arms. "That's called living." He laughed, this time lighter. "Funny. I walked in here thinking I needed advice about love." He shook his head. "And I'm leaving thinking about identity." "Love always leads there," Emily said, "when we pay attention." The clock showed it was almost closing time. Emily gathered a few cups, leaving space for the end of that conversation. "Are you going to do anything different tomorrow?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm going to say yes to an invitation I've been avoiding for weeks." Emily raised an eyebrow. "That's it? For now?" He smiled. "Small, but honest." Emily nodded. "Small and honest changes more than big and fake." He stood up, grabbed his coat. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Truly. For the coffee. For the conversation." He smiled. "And for not pretending everything is fine when it isn't." Emily answered with a nod. He walked toward the door, paused for a second, but didn't hesitate. This time, he opened the door and walked out. Emily watched through the glass as he moved away. Steady steps, different posture. She took a deep breath. 2 days passed. The Maple Root Diner woke up the way it always did. The smell of butter on the griddle, strong coffee, the radio playing an old song nobody remembered the name of, but everyone knew the chorus. Frank was already complaining about the new coffee machine. Mrs. June was arguing with the toaster as if it were a stubborn person. The bell above the door did its job without emotion. Normal routine. Emily came in, tied her apron, took a deep breath. She didn't think much about customers after they left. If she thought about all of them, she wouldn't last. But some stayed with her, and he was one of those. She was wiping down the counter when the bell rang. She looked up automatically. It was him, but it wasn't the same man. His body was looser, his shoulders less tense, his eyes present. There was no rush, no escape in his steps. Emily knew before he even spoke. Something had changed. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied, pouring coffee without asking. He smiled. "I said yes." Emily set the cup in front of him. "And how was it?" He took a deep breath. "This one full. Strange. Uncomfortable. Good." He laughed. "All at the same time." "Then it was real," Emily said. "It was." He took a sip. She wasn't perfect. Not even close to the story I'd been telling myself for years. He shrugged, and that was a relief. Emily nodded. "When the fantasy falls apart, space opens up." "Exactly." He looked at his own hands. "For the first time, I wasn't trying to fit someone into a place that no longer existed." Emily crossed her arms, satisfied. "And the guilt?" he thought. "It still shows up." He smiled faintly. "But it doesn't run things anymore." Emily nodded. "Guilt becomes guidance when we listen without obeying." He laughed. "You should charge for lines like that." "I already do." She pointed at the coffee. "It's included." He laughed for real this time. "I did something else too." Emily tilted her head. "What?" "I wrote her a message." He said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. Emily paid attention but didn't react. "I didn't send it. Yet. I don't know if I will." He took a deep breath. "But I wrote it without blaming her, without asking for anything, just saying what I felt and owning the fact that the silence was my choice." Emily nodded. "That changes everything, even if she never reads it. It changed things for me." He looked at her. "I realized something." "What?" "That I didn't want an answer." He smiled. "I wanted to hear myself." Emily felt a warm tightness in her chest. "So you closed it." "I did." He nodded. "Not with her, with the version of me that was hiding." Emily took a deep breath. The diner kept running. People came in, went out. Orders were placed. Normal life. But there, at that end of the counter, something had finally fallen into place. "You know," he said, "the funniest part?" "What?" "I always thought unrequited love meant rejection." He shook his head. "But now I see that in my case, it meant a lack of courage." Emily answered without thinking. "Unrequited love hurts. Unlived love paralyzes." He nodded. "And I'm tired of being stuck." He He finished his coffee, stood up, placed the money on the counter. "Thank you, Emily. Always." He walked toward the door, and this time he didn't stop. Emily watched as he stepped outside and blended into the street. She took a deep breath, picked up the empty cup, and set it in the sink. Another day, another story that didn't end in romance, but ended in movement. And that, she knew, was sometimes even better. The bell rang again, and life went on. And life